And now back to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
Hello and welcome back to Just Energy Radio. I'm here talking to Barbara Hand Clow about 2012 and the new underworld we have just entered. Barbara, somebody posted an article. The URL is really long, or else I would announce it on air. But they talk about a bunch of stuff, and it goes on and says, helicopters, water cannons, and police vehicles, including an armored surveillance truck, accompanied an endless column of anti-riot police mounted on horses and also marching down the railway tracks into the dense woods. And then it goes on to say, but by Sunday night, the same police officers were begging the protesters for respite.
That's right. That's the exact event I'm talking about, the Castor train. And the fact that there's a news blackout. The last news I was able to get is that they encircled the train with NATO barbed wire and put surveillance lights on it. That was the last news I was able to get. And also, very significantly, that the police on the ground refused to do it anymore, even though their superiors were telling them to keep attacking. But that's all we know at this point.
And this does not go on to say anything more.
Yeah,
this is the Aletho, Aletho news. So it's their website that they have this article.
Yeah.
1,000 injured in a nuclear protest.
That's right. So I really sort of, got pretty excited there about getting those levels of news out as much as possible on the airwaves. But I think that really always, like with your own work, energy work and healing work, the issue is back to how is this affecting us and how are we doing? Because we function as an individual, even though we seem to have moved into this field of being in a flow. So the question would be, how are we going to be functioning as an individual, and how does this flow affect us?
Mhm.
And I'd like to know what you'd like to ask about that, kind of. Because
I think what gets most people, with the work that I do, people will come and they have questions about this is going on in my life, and I will tell them what I see. But it talks to them on an external perspective. And they'll look at me and go, huh? And then I'll turn it around and go, but this is what you will experience in your body looking out from the inside. And so can you address some of the changes that we might notice as if we were looking from the inside? Because I think that's how people really get.
Yeah. Well, from that perspective, the new moon has a lot to say. And this new moon in Scorpio on the 5th of November, which sets a field in for a month, what's going on with that new moon is like sending us a message about how to activate our will. In other words, as we move into this collective flow, instead of being so much in an individual flow, the question would be, how do we activate our will? How does a bird fly in a flock of 1,000 birds and turn the right way all the time, if you get my drift? And so the Scorpio new moon was saying that the only way to achieve that level of activation of our willpower is emotional clarity. And of course, that's always Scorpio's issue. Scorpio is always pushing us into emotional clarity. And so then the key transit during this new moon was that Chiron and Neptune went direct. Chiron went direct a few hours before the new moon, and Neptune went direct a few hours after. And Chiron and Neptune were conjunct. They were less than 10 seconds apart when they went direct. And Chiron rules, I know, it's amazing transit actually, especially at a new moon. And Chiron rules the core, what I call the core wound. In other words, each one of us is really like an onion. And we've got all these layers of trauma and all these layers of wounding and emotional experiences that we're handling. And then at the very center of the onion is the core of the onion. And when we do heal ourselves, or when a healer helps us heal ourselves, what we're really doing is we're getting into the core wound of consciousness. So Chiron rules that process of going into the core wound. And then Neptune rules the process of accessing spirit by letting ourselves. Neptune is always so hard to describe it. It has to do with like letting go of our boundaries and letting go of our resistance and just becoming one with spiritual consciousness. So with those two going direct at that point, each one of us as an individual is really dealing with this core wounding and this access to spirit. And I watch people, and I know you do too, because you're working in this field, and I can see people doing that. And I can see it's very difficult for them. I can see it's very confusing for them. But I can really see that they're doing that, and that surely is the pathway to emotional clarity. So this new moon in Scorpio just sent out this powerful vibratory field of healing at that level. So I think that's what we're experiencing personally. Does it resonate with you?
That totally resonates with me. One of the things that I've been seeing with people, I mean, this has been going on for the last several years, and now I'm going, okay, where are we? We're in 2010. Okay, maybe not since 99, but since like 2005, and it just has been escalating, is that people's buttons are being pushed, push so that they can have a chance to clear them. And in the last year, it's just been like just downright fear, with 2012 even being added to that fear bucket of what's going to happen. Yeah. And I think people are to the place, and listening to what you say, it really resonates with me that people are just going to, and the word I like to use is surrender.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's Neptune.
They're just, but they're just going to go, okay, this is where it is. This is who I am, and not fight the healing. Just allow it to happen. Allow life to happen.
Yes, yeah, and astrologically, Chiron and Neptune have been almost totally conjunct for 2 years now. And they were very close for a couple of years before that. And so at this new moon, that whole process that you and I are attempting to describe actually kind of goes off like a bomb, in the sense that they've been working on it, and then they're going to start finding that they can come from their core strength. Now, I don't know what else can explain those people who lay down on those tracks. I don't know about you, but that is bravery. And people only can do things like that when they're really coming from the core level. Do you see what I mean?
Well, but, once you let go of your fear, you don't have anything else to lose.
Yeah,
Chris Christopherson, Janis Joplin,
and you let go of your fear once you surrender. In other words, as long as you're still holding back, you're still going to be hanging on to that fear. And so that's a pretty good description of where we are kind of personally and individually. And then I like to bring in 9 dimensions of consciousness, because ultimately, even though I teach Carl Calleman's work, my own teaching, of course, has to do with 9 dimensions of consciousness. And what I've been noticing since day 7 started, I've been noticing something really, really interesting. And I've been asking people about their dreams, and kind of questioning them to see, like, what's going on with them. And think of it this way, okay, we live in the 3rd dimension. That's linear space and time, the solid world. And then, according to my understanding of things, we could think of ourselves in the 3rd dimension as being part of a gigantic vertical axis of consciousness that actually goes from the iron core crystal in the center of the planet. That's the 1st dimension. And that vertical axis goes all the way from that core crystal in the center of our planet, all the way through the dimensions up into the galactic center. And, of course, that's what I teach. And so you can imagine how excited I am when I hear about all this activity in the galactic center, because that would mean that vertical axis of consciousness is like really becoming very, very highly activated at this point. So when we look at this from a dimensional point of view, I find one of the easiest dimensions to understand besides our dimension, the third dimension, I find the sixth dimension a really easy dimension to understand. And that's because the sixth dimension is the world of forms and ideas that create things in our dimension. It's very much like Plato. Plato had this whole description of the world of ideas. And so each one of us, when we're in the third dimension, when we're in our consciousness here, we are also connected to like an ideal level of form. And in that ideal level of form, one of the things that exists there is an ideal sense of ourselves. And so one of the reasons that people need to do yoga and Tai Chi and sacred dance and stuff like that is we need to keep maintaining our balance with our ideal self while we're in the solid world. Do you see what I mean? So there's an active connection between that world of ideals. Like in my world of ideals, I live in a world of no war, and yet I live down here in this planet, and look what's going on around me. And so what I've been noticing since we went into day 7 is that people seem to be wandering around in these other dimensions a lot more. Like I talked to somebody who clearly was describing to me being in the sixth dimension, in the world of ideals, and having a full consciousness of himself. But when he tried to locate himself, he couldn't figure out where he was or when it was, because he wasn't in 3D. Do you see what I mean? He was in that idea.
I mean, I understand what you're saying, and I'm going, have I been experiencing that?
Yeah, watch yourself at this point. Yeah, because I'm noticing myself doing it too. And here's what I make of this at this point. These are really hard things to describe because these are new realities that are coming in at this point. But think of a flock of birds, like sparrows or something like that, all flying the way they do and turning, and cascading and swirling, what it looks like. Wouldn't it make sense that the way they navigate to do that is actually in a higher dimension? Like how could they all fly in synchronicity, or how can the salmon, flow in synchronicity unless they're actually navigating from another dimension? Does that make sense?
I'm with you there.
Yeah. Okay, so I know this, but this is really hard stuff to talk about. I'm trying to make sure I'm being clear, because I see it more than I can verbalize it, if you know what I mean. So in my dimensional system, the seventh dimension is where the flow comes from. The seventh dimension is the dimension of the intergalactic highways of light. And the Pleiadians have told me that the universe has these long lines of light going through it, and these long lines of light in the universe are what create synchronicity. And so these long lines of light, and then they would affect our solar system, our galaxy, all those levels. These lines, these kind of, what do I want to say, navigational consciousness lines would be what would make it possible for birds and fish to fly in synchronicity, and it's what it would make it possible for like birds to migrate and dolphins and whales to swim where they swim. Do you follow what I mean? Well, imagine.
But wouldn't you say that people are starting to tap into that energy when they start asking, and acting more from a conscious level, where they're actually tuning into what's going on and, stepping out of the way? I'm really about that whole surrender thing, but stepping out of the way and getting in the flow and going, okay, I don't know where I'm going, but
yes,
this is where I'm going.
You nailed it cold. I absolutely agree with you. And as you know as a healer, and I do too, that for years and years and years we've known individuals who are doing that. And I know that I've been doing it myself. But what seems to be happening with this calendar influence, it would seem that button got turned on for everybody. And so then when the nuclear protesters in Germany have the courage to deal with the police in that way, all of us start feeling more courage. And I can see evidence for this. I can see it in communities. I can see it in politics and stuff like that. And as you said, you just expressed it so perfectly. As each one of us surrenders, and while we've also been, healing those core wounds, then we're starting to flow. And once we're flowing from the heart with good intentions and co-creation with the universe, all of the powers, all of the global elite, none of that stuff can control us anymore.
Because they're coming from a totally different place. I mean, one of the things that I know, deep within my heart is that when you're coming from that place of flow and that place of surrender, you don't have a choice but to do what's for, and I'm going to say the highest good. I mean, I'm kind of simplifying that whole concept, as opposed to doing what's important for me, or coming from like a greedy, nasty, sinister kind of place just to meet your own ends.
Yeah, I agree.
It's impossible.
Yeah, and then what happens, too, is that for those of us who start coming from that kind of place, because it's a multidimensional flow, then you, generally speaking, are moving in the right direction. Suddenly you find you made the right choice about an apartment or the right choice about a job or whatever is going on. Because when you're in that flow, you're actually co-creating with the universe itself. You're in the flow that Carl Calleman described. That's the thing about this man's work. It's just so brilliant because he gave us some time parameters for like how this flow is working out and the meaning of the flow itself. That's why I'm just, it's kind of unusual, for a teacher at my level, or writer of many, many books and all that, to teach somebody else's work. But that's just how important this discovery is. And so that's why I'm saying these 4 months, November, December, January, February, are of such critical importance because, let's go back to 1999. When the 8th time acceleration, the Galactic Underworld time acceleration, went on gear. Most everybody was just pretty much basically crazy at that point because of the intensity of the energy. Well, if Calleman's right, then that kind of intensification is coming again in March. And so it would make sense to me that the more that people are flowing with the energy, the more we can just do it and get used to it, I think it's going to be easier for us in March.
Things have just been speeding up so much for so many people. It's like lots to do, not enough time. There's this part of my brain that goes, I don't know that I could take another speed up. I mean, I know I'll do it.
Yeah.
But,
I know. Well,
it kind of boggles me a little bit.
Well, I'm sure you've had a few enlightenment experiences, where you just suddenly, for whatever reason, you just move into that flow of light. And I've had a couple of them, and then it took me about 10 years to adjust to what happened, you know what I mean? So, near-death experiences, whatever you name it. And the idea would be that as of March, that level of energy will be now it's not going to happen right in March. It's going to build and build and build starting in March. But the idea would be that I think let's go forward to March, and more people one by one, group by group would start to move into that high intensity of consciousness. And in my experience as a teacher, the reason I teach nine-dimensional consciousness is it really seems to help people handle those kinds of frequencies. That's why Jerry and I teach it. My partner, my husband of 38 years at this point, that's why we teach it, because it does seem to help people as far as we can tell.
We have, I'm going to say, 5 minutes left, maybe not even. Let me ask this question. And so, according to Calleman, the calendar ends October, I don't have the number in front of me, 20th, 2011, which is less than a year away. And so the calendar ends and, the odometer resets. And so when we move into the next world, are we moving into a new 1 billion blah, blah, blah cycle? And will things, even though they're faster in the moment, actually in the big picture of things, be moving slower? Did that make any sense at all?
Well, nobody knows the answer to that, as you well know. And so, but of course, I wrote a book about it called The Mayan Code, because the fun thing about my work is then I take Calleman's ideas and I say what I think. And so in the book, I had to ask that question, and that's the part of the book where I got into exopolitics, because I said to myself, okay, if this is really true, then what could possibly happen? You know, what would reality be like at that point? And the only answer that I could find for it was that we would move back into being at one with cosmic consciousness. Now, this is an idea that's a little bit easier for me to decipher than for some people, because I actually believe that we as a species, that we were in cosmic consciousness until about 12,000 years ago. In other words, I'm one of those people who believes that we were there for thousands and millions of years, and then we got knocked out of that level of consciousness 11,500 years ago during a series of cataclysms. So the way I look at everything is that we're a wounded, multi-traumatized species, and that we're moving back to enlightenment. So then, if you go, and I'm, by the way, I got another book coming through on that issue. It's just got to be written.
Cool.
But yeah, right. But if that's true, then we don't have to be as freaked out as we think we need to be, because if you can buy into the idea that before 12,000 years ago we were that way as a species, and animals were that way, and plants were that way, then once we move back into that kind of consciousness, we're going to be okay, number one. And number two, we're going to be at one with the universe, and that's, I think, why it's the Universal Underworld. And that means that we're not quarantined anymore. So one of my central ideas is that once we became a multi-traumatized species because of a series of cataclysms, then we were quarantined from the rest of the universe, the stars, planets, and galaxies, because we became such a violent and difficult species. So it's easier to imagine what might happen if you realize that all we're really doing is returning to what we once had. It's a little bit like the Garden of Eden in a way.
Yay. One last very, very quick question. And this is, I'm just throwing it out there. So let's say the October 20th, 2011 date is not correct. I mean, because there's still a lot of controversy, and I'm not making commentary one way or the other. Do we still go through these cycles? And, I mean, you know, I guess what I'm trying to say is the date doesn't invalidate the science or the theories that go behind the shiftings. And so whether it happens next month or in 6 months, we're really not taught. It's still going to happen, correct?
Well, see, Rita, the only healthy way to handle these ideas, as far as I'm concerned, is to be with the ideas with your consciousness. The reason Carl's work is so healthy is it's not an idea that says everything's going to happen December 21st, 2012. In the meantime, you can just sit around and be afraid. The great thing about his work is it's getting people on the bandwagon with the work, like the ceremonies that we did this last weekend. So then the other thing I'd like to put in before we go off the air here is that the December 21st, 2012 idea is based on the idea of a big galactic alignment, as you know. And the only problem with that idea is the galactic alignment actually occurs over a period of 50 years. And the closest point of the galactic alignment that 2012 people are talking about occurred during 1998. And I published that very clearly in Alchemy. John Jenkins, one of the other people who works with 2012, also published the same information. And so one of the distortions going on in the movement right now is the idea that there's some kind of Big Bang December 21st, 2012, when in fact there simply isn't. It already happened. But 2012 is such an incredible year because season by season and equinoxes and solstices, we're going to be back into the universal mind consciousness. And so I don't have you see how I don't have a conflict between those two ideas? But what I do dislike strongly is the tendency for people to sit around and chew their nails and live in fear until December 21st, 2012. Because I think it's very dysfunctional. It's just the same thing as the Jehovah's Witnesses. It's just more apocalyptical fundamentalist thinking, as far as I'm concerned. So working with Calleman is very progressive, and people are actively involved in this idea, and they're making these fields of consciousness change by their very own behavior.
Barbara, I think that's a perfect note to end on, that people shouldn't bite their nails and be all worried about what's going on and what could possibly happen, et cetera, et cetera. Barbara, again, thank you. Oh, I lost my music.
Oh,
all right.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Rita. Always have fun talking.
Well, that'll start over again.
And you wouldn't go lie on train tracks if you thought the world was coming to an end December 21st, 2012. You know.
No, but I would like to charge up my credit cards. Take a trip, go to Egypt, do something fun. All right, Barbara, always a pleasure having you on. Your website, Hand Clow 2012, and I'm sure you'll be back on soon. Thanks, Barbara. Okay, and after these messages, we'll be talking to Chetan Parker about human design. We'll be right back.
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages.